Welcome to the Brigham Young University Family History Library webinar series. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Braden Knutson. I'll be your host for this webinar today. We'd like to ask you to answer a couple of our polls that we have down at the bottom of the screen to let us know where you're from and how you heard about today's webinar as we go through some of our announcements. Our next webinar will be on Tuesday, March 7th at 5:30 p.m. and that webinar will be by Bob Taylor, and we hope to see you then as well. It'll be a good webinar, and we invite everyone to join us. Today we'll be pleased to hear from Laurie Castillo, who will be giving a presentation titled Jurisdiction, When and Where. Laurie is currently First Vice President of the Utah Valley Technology and Genealogy Group. She is a former Vice President and member of the Board of Directors of the Utah Genealogical Association. She has served as a consultant and teacher at the BYU Family History Library for over 24 years, 8 years as a BYU consultant trainer, 7 years as a family history missionary trainer for the senior MTC, 3 years as Stake Family Records Extradition Director, and over 25 years as a ward consultant. Laurie is a freelance writer of genealogy articles. She has presented at the FGS UGA 2000 Conference, BYU Family History Conference in 2014, 2015, and 2016. She has also presented at BYU Education Week and numerous UGA and regional and local family history conferences. Roots Tech 2016 and Roots Tech 2017. She has been a professional researcher for nearly 30 years. So we will turn the time over to Laurie now, and as the screen is loading, remind you that we do have a comments box and a questions box on the right hand side. Feel free to write in with any comments or questions, and we will make sure we get to them by the end of the presentation.
Well, today's presentation is called Jurisdiction equals When plus Where. Conrad Hilton received a call from a Texas dignitary informing him that he had been selected as the Texan of Distinction to be honored at ceremonies that year. Conrad had begun his career as a hotelier in Texas during the original oil boom, when population was exploding and the accommodations were short. Shortly before the event was scheduled to take place, he received another call from the same official, who sounded quite distressed. "You were born in San Antonio, weren't you?" he queried. "Yes, San Antonio, Socorro, New Mexico." "Oh my, you will be the first ever honorary Texan of distinction." It appears that someone had messed up on the fact-checking there, and that someone had made some assumptions. Has that ever been you? Alan Alda said, "Your assumptions are your windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while, or the light won't come in." My third-great-grandfather, Willis Copeland, was said to have been born in 1816 in Stanton, Augusta, West Virginia. Is that even possible? Let's think about it. West Virginia was formed in 1863 during the middle of the Civil War while no one was looking. I thought this was the answer to this incorrect listing, but it isn't. Augusta County did not become part of West Virginia. It's still in Virginia and always was. In 1902, Stanton became an independent city, not under the jurisdiction of Augusta County. Still, about half the listings I find in online trees and internet hits shows Willis Copeland as being born in West Virginia. Okay. There are two parts to the concept of jurisdiction. First, jurisdiction is the power and authority to hear and decide cases. And secondly, the territory in which the court may exercise such power. It is crucial to know and understand the correct jurisdictions when searching for records so you don't miss anything. It is not enough to know where. We need to know what happened, we need to know where it happened, and when it happened. You really cannot know where to look until you know when. Though that's why I say that when plus where equals jurisdiction. Another way of looking at this, Henry Winkler said that assumptions are the termites of relationships. I would like to borrow that phrase and state that assumptions are the termites of genealogy. Not pretty. Okay. Okay, we're going to talk about the 5 challenges we have in working with jurisdictions. And rather than read through this list, I'm going to start through and go through them one at a time. Okay, first of all, we're going to locate geographic resources. And so the first place I'd like to show you, and also historical gazetteers, because historical gazetteers help you to locate place names not found on a modern map. It's most helpful if you can locate in a library or archive or online a map from the very time that your ancestor lived in a given area, so you can see their world and their boundaries and the names of the places. Okay, so, and all these kind of items are available in many formats, digital, film, and print, and they're also available on national, state, and county levels. So be sure you look for, atlases, maps, and gazetteers in that way. So now I'm going to show you a couple of my favorite map location websites. The first one is Map of US, and it has historical atlases and maps of the US and states. And you can see the links there at the bottom of the page for the various states. And also there's the link to go to the historical map section. So you want to click on everything on this website. It's all wonderfully useful. But I selected the Illinois page as my example page. Okay. Here we are. Okay, every one of these state pages has an automated, or they call it interactive map of the county formation. And for Illinois, the formation map years go from 1790, and I guess the latest one, when it settled to what it is like today, was in 1869. So the red arrow at the top is pointing to the play button. If you click, this presentation will start and will show you an animated view of Illinois County development from the beginning. It's kind of an interesting thing to do, just as an overview in the beginning. The second arrow is pointing toward a list of years when counties were formed in Illinois. So there's a new map for every year that the state looked different here. That's why they look like random years, but they're really the years when there was a county formation change. And then click on any one of those to see what the counties look like in that particular year. The next red arrow points to a set of Illinois census year maps. So it'll be what the census looks like in that particular, what the counties look like at that particular census year. And the neat thing is it's that year's counties overlaid over a modern map of the way the counties turned out. So you can kind of see where, excuse me, you can see where it's going. And below that is a list of the abbreviations used for the various counties on this set of maps. Let me show you an example of why this is significant. We're going to look at northern Illinois, where many of my mother's ancestors settled. First, 1835. At the top of, things are pretty wide open at the top there. Cook County, the home of Chicago, goes clear to the Wisconsin border. There is unorganized territory in the center of Illinois at the top. Now we go to 1836. We see Cook County has been reduced in size, with McHenry being formed from a piece of Cook and a piece of the unorganized territory. Next to McHenry, Winnebago has been formed. By 1839, the counties along the Wisconsin border have been further subdivided and now include Stevenson, Boone, and Lake counties. Cook has been divided to form DuPage, and Kane County has been divided to form DeKalb. What does this mean? This means Mom's ancestors could have lived in 3 different counties without moving and 6 without really trying. I had wondered why they were moving around so much. But they really weren't. So this would help you know what county courthouse, what archives to look in at those particular, as those things changed. The next location for excellent map information I'd like to show you is, this is the Newberry Library. If you've ever heard of the Newberry Honor Books, this is the library that sponsors that. This is in Chicago. And at the top, if you click on the, there's research there, and you can see that I chose digital resources and publications. Then you scroll down on this page and select Maps, Travel, and Exploration. The very collection at the very top of this list is the Atlas of Historical County Boundaries. This has a set of maps that's similar to the map of us.org, the animated maps. And at this current moment, they are undergoing a revamp and will be reposted shortly. But there's much more involved with this website that I wanted to show you that's working already. Here, you can click on whichever state that you'd like to click on. I chose Idaho for the example. And one of the things, these are the different things that you can choose to look at for Idaho. This isn't even the entire list. This is as many as I could catch with one shot. You can view the index of counties and equivalents for the whole state. You can view the consolidated chronology of state and county boundaries, meaning it'll go day by day, year by year, explaining what the changes are for the whole state. You can select a particular county and just look at the changes chronologically for that particular county. And there's a wonderful bibliography that they created showing all the sources that they used to put this information together. So that would be more places to check. And sometimes there's a historical commentary that the researchers putting this together have included to tell you extra information that they discovered. Further down this list, which went way down the page, you'll be able, there's a spot where you can download all of the material for a given state in a PDF format, so you can have it for your own reference. Or you can download it as a KMZ file to be used with Google Earth and Google Maps. So some great options there. Now to show you what does this actually look like. This is Bannock County, and it shows you when it was created and what land it was created from, and goes through and shows you. You can see Bannock lost some territory to Franklin County in 1918 and in 1919 to Caribou. But in 1927, Bannock gained some territory from Oneida and exchanged some territory with Power County. So, I mean, that can be super helpful when, you know, your family might not have moved at all, but when one of these land exchanges or rearrangement of counties, it may look to you as though they have, but you will need to look in the county courthouses of all the counties involved to be sure. Here is a look at the bibliography and sources. This is just the very first part of a nice long alphabetical list, so that'll give you ideas of places where you can get more detailed information. Okay, one of the really premier things, resources, is called the Map Guide to the U.S. Federal Census. This is a printed a volume that's in most family history centers and most places where you can do family history research. It's just considered that important. It has in a printed format maps that match each federal census year, and the current year boundaries overlay the final version of the counties. And the authors have included very helpful information with each of those maps explaining changes and things that went on. So something I always like to consult. And that's an example of what it looks like. This is Alabama, I think, 1820. So you can see the current boundaries overlaid over the white boundaries, which is the way Alabama will turn out. This is a website I really appreciate for a lot of reasons. It's called Census Finder, but they've accumulated a lot more information on this website besides links to online census records. They have an entire section that's just called U.S. County Maps, as you can see, and you can click on those. And You might, this is where you may find helpful historic maps of your state and county. These maps are on a census site because it's imperative to know the county boundary when you're searching the census. So this collection is being added to continuously. And in the front, the home page of it always has the what's new, what we've added. It's amazing. So I chose Illinois, again, as an example here, and I clipped a few pieces of a very long page so you can see they give you a map of how things turned out. This is looking at the map section. It lists the counties alphabetically, and if they have any kind of a historic map for that, they've just inserted it under that county name and showed you what year it is. And then there's a section where you can click on more historical maps for Illinois there, and Illinois Maps at Ancestry. It's a wonderfully well done website. So how do you locate places that used to exist? Without the eye strain of hunting inch by inch on an old map, I've done plenty of that, and that's no fun. The answer is using a gazetteer. Sometimes people will grab a gazetteer and think, oh, no maps. This is no good. You know, what kind of a book is this? A gazetteer is not an atlas. It's really more like a phone book, a listing and a description of places. Some gazetteers include populated places, and some include geographical features as well as populated places. You may know that your family lived near such and such a creek or a mountain, for example, and that may help you to locate that place in a gazetteer. To locate specific gazetteers, I recommend doing a Google search like the one I've shown on the screen. Just fill in your place or your state and do that Google search. I did that. I filled in Vermont just on the spur of the moment. And the first hit I got was something that's from the U.S. GenWeb project. It's the Vermont Historical Gazetteer. And this is a work that was compiled between 1867 and 1891. It's a 5-volume set, and it says, as you can see on the screen there, that it's a local history of all the towns in the state. Wow. So you can see the links there. You can search each of those volumes, or they have actually created a name index for the entire set. Can you imagine? So this is a wonderful thing that I just discovered just like that. And looking forward to using it in my future Vermont endeavors. Another website you might wish to keep track of is the Peabody GNIS service. This is located at the Yale Peabody Museum of Natural History. It's the GNIS stands for the Geographical Names Information System of the United States. The Peabody GNIS is a simplified version of the official GNIS database, and it's used by Yale in cataloging their historic collections. This is the GNIS information, but boiled down to one line of information for each place. And it's the information they feel is most useful as they catalog their historical collection at Yale. So for each place, the information included is the feature name, the feature type, the county, and the coordinates, the GPS coordinates. So I give this a chance. And if you want to see the more complex version of this, just Google GNIS and you can go to the full version of that website. Here, here's a list of the states when you're on the Peabody, and click on those. Here are some, I wanted you to see the types of features that they include in this gazetteer. A lot of them are natural features, but they can be things like a cemetery or a school, a levee, you know, a bridge, something like that is man-made. So that's really helpful. Now, another website I wanted you to know about is WorldCat. WorldCat is the world's largest library catalog. You can use it to locate titles. You can use it to just search a topic or a name. And this is what professional librarians use when you make an interlibrary loan request at a library. This is what they use to locate copies of it throughout the United States and now beyond. So that's another use of this. All right. The WorldCat is a product of Elsie, the online computer library catalog. And the contents of this, books, periodicals, newspapers, articles, DVDs, CDs, most anything except manuscripts. They do have manuscript locators, but we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. I put in as a search just county boundary maps and Virginia, and I got 600 hits. These are the top 3. And that's just what my search looked like. And I chose the top one, the top hit, which was Atlas of County Boundary Changes in Virginia from 1634 to 1895. That sounds like a winner, doesn't it? That's an awesome book. And if you were doing Virginia research, it would be very helpful. So below the book details, which you just saw on that hit page for WorldCat here, is a list of the libraries closest to your home that have a copy. You can see that, and it also tells you how many miles that library is from your house. And since your computer knows where you are, it just does this automatically. You can, at the top, change, if you happen to be somewhere besides home, you can change the location and put in the zip code of wherever you are, and it will show you a list that works for that. So you can look down that list. If it's close enough, you can jump in the car and go, or plan to stop there on your next family vacation. You can also see if you can attempt to interlibrary loan it to a library near you. If the libraries that you have access to near you can't get the place that has it to loan it, one thing that you can see, every one of these institutions that is listed as having a copy of this book, it has a blue link there. You can click on that, and you can get contact information for that particular library and call them yourself and find out what it would take to get copies of the pages you need or to have research done. So, okay. Another one of my very favorite places for finding things is the Internet Archive at archive.org. This is an internet storage site for materials that are no longer under copyright restrictions, or materials for which permission has been given to post here. Materials are, most of the time, they're downloadable. Many books, periodicals, microfilms, etc. are available. Here I did a search for Gazetteer of the United States, and you can see the list of years for which I located a downloadable Gazetteer. It's quite impressive. Everything from 1776 to 1884, and the list is growing. I chose one of those to show you as an example. This is the 1853 Gazetteer of the United States of America. And let me show you. I clipped and pasted that page so you could see it larger, showing you the various types of download options from which you can choose. You can download in a black and white PDF, or you can download in a regular PDF. I like doing a regular PDF because that preserves any color, any tone there is in the book, and I think that just looks more cool and historical. So it does give you options depending on what you want to do with and how you want to store it. So you can create your own reference library on your own computer. Okay, challenge number 2. We're going to talk about locating historical materials regarding jurisdiction. We need to learn government terminology, court structure, boundary changes, the dates the records begin and end, and see if we can locate territorial, state, county, and local histories. For locating those county histories and all these things, and remember, you can try WorldCat and some of the other places that we've already talked about. One of the things that I view as a modern day research gold mine are the state archives, and this is the front page of the COSA website, which is the Council of State Archivists. And on this page, they have a link to every state and the District of Columbia and I think Puerto Rico, you know, the territories, and have contact information there by email. They have a link to their website. And so very helpful site. And for any new any new state that you are going to begin researching, I would recommend going to the webpage for that state archive, state library. Okay. Another website with helpful links is Genealogy Trails and the History Group. And on this page at their website, they have links to state archives, state libraries, and the State Historical Society. Sometimes these organizations work in tandem or are together. Some states have what they call a state library and archive in one location. Sometimes the State Historical Society participates with the state archives in taking care of the old records. But they've given you links here, and those were wonderful places to check. And I did find on Wikipedia a list of historical societies and museums for every state for the United States. So museums often have wonderful collections of materials that would be helpful in the research. So you have all those links, all those places you can go for more records. All right, so Google often. Google regional, county, and local libraries, historical and genealogical societies. University libraries often have wonderful collections and special collections of one-of-a-kind items. Look for county record repositories, and believe it or not, when I am hoping to find something on the Family Search Wiki or on Internet Archive, using Google often gets me there faster than anything else. So I Google a topic that I'm after or a location, and one of the very top hits seem to always be for Family Search Wiki and things that might be in the Internet Archive. So that's one thing to know, because those two sometimes don't have the most flexible search engine of their own. So it's nice to know that they can be searched other ways. A couple of great reference works that are found in most every family history center or research library are the Handybook for Genealogists and Ancestry's Red Book. Whoops, I need to go back and talk about that a minute. These books will give you the basic history of each state, including when their civil records start. They also provide a list of all the counties, when they were formed, and whether they were formed from original territory or pieces of other counties. They're very helpful reference works, and I like to pull those out and get an idea of what states are near what states, and it does kind of give you a quick look at which of their records have survived in the courthouse. One of my favorite new finds is History Geo, and this is the first landowners project. Excuse me. My search here at the top blue arrow is pointing to the name. It looks like Fries, but it's a German name pronounced Fries. And I can browse counties. There's all kinds of things you can do here. I want to look at all the options, but all I did was put in the surname Fries, and I chose the state of Texas. And what did I find? But I found Jacob. Actually, what you'll see first, and I'm not clear why it didn't show up, but you'll see a map of that area showing the parcels of land and the surname of whoever owns it. And this is for the first owners of the land. And this is actually, and they have actually gone and looked up the original land records, and so for Jacob Fries, there were 7 documents here that all I had to do is click through the list of them, and I can download them. You can see them here, the original land documents. The top showing Jacob Fries, that he received 160 acres and what date that was, and then there's other notations of things that happened over the course of time there. You can see that map now, right there. Kind of behind the other thing that I have showing you. There's several things you can click on once you're here, and one of them is this U.S. county boundary history. So for this particular parcel that I have selected, it's showing you that for every census year listed there, it was in Gillespie County. But if the county boundaries had shifted enough, which they did further north in Gillespie County, some of my family ended up in Mason County over the course of time. You can see that you would not want to just put in Jacob Fries, but you'd want to, I like just searching by last name. It shows you a list of all the Frieses here. And I know that the J Fries is also him, and I know Adam is actually my second great grandfather, and those A Frieses, they're also Adam. So it gives you the idea to see, and you can see here over the course of time, Adam's name was also spelled with 2 S's at the end. So by looking at this whole alphabetical style listing they have, I was able to pick up some things that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. History Geo is now a link on the page for the BYU Family History Library. I think you can only use it when you're actually here on campus, but and it's a subscription website that you could get a home subscription to. So be sure and give it a try when you get a chance. It's very helpful and it's very cool. As a matter of fact, what I love about this map here showing J Fries is that Adam Fries married one of the Pale girls, and I can see now that they were neighbors, and so aside going to the same church, they were neighbors, so that's fun. So the third thing we need to know is the basics about jurisdictions in the United States. What happens when jurisdiction change and anomalies that can happen. So let's start right in. I want to make clear before we get going that before 1787 there was no United States. Every part of the territory that became the United States belonged to one of these other entities, and that's not including the Native Americans, which should also be included. But remember, if your ancestors were here before 1787, the records of their lives may be included in the archives of these other countries because those were their colonial areas. So and remember, if when you're listing your family history records, you're listing a place in the United States, a place that became part of the United States, but it's before 1787, you shouldn't really be listing it as United States because it isn't. And you should be listing it as a territory or a colony of, and they've built that into, I can see that they've built that into the family search, what do they call that, the location listing, and other websites as well. So be watching for that. And that will help steer you to the correct place to find their records. Now, I chose an example of, as an example, Provo, Utah, to show you the number of jurisdictions a place can be in. Provo's in the 10th District Court for the United States. It's in the 4th Utah District Court District. There would be a county court, there'd be federal congressional district, Utah state and congressional districts, tax districts, all this sort of thing. Here's even more districts that somebody living in Provo would be in, all kinds of things. Here's what the U.S. district, this is for the United States Courts of Appeals and United States District Courts. So you can see Utah as part of the 10th District. And of course, these have changed over the course of time. Let's talk about Utah as an example. In the beginning, Utah was one judicial district and the headquarters were in Salt Lake City. But in 1988, the 8th district was formed, And this is where Utah stands today as far as judicial districts. Well, how does that impact your research in Utah? Here's a couple of county examples here. You can see Uinta County and Utah County. Utah County has been all over the place. It began, of course, in the life in the third district, and in 1851 was transferred to the first district. Then in 1856 was transferred to the second district as they were creating things, and then it was transferred in 1859 back to the fourth district, where it stayed until 1896. And then it was in its fifth move, it was transferred to the fourth district in 1896. And has remained there until the present time. So you can see if you have ancestors that live in Utah County, you need to watch which years you're looking for them, because their records will be in different places. For example, at this time, I think Ancestry and Family Search have up a collection of third district court records for Utah. Well, as far as Utah County goes, that's only going to work for you for several months during 1851. Okay, so that was a chart from the Utah State Archives. There are other jurisdictions in our lives. For example, the Catholic Church in Utah is the example I chose. And many of my Utah ancestors were Catholics, so this is important to me to know. If you live in Utah, you're in the Salt Lake Diocese, and then you're in the confines of a specific parish. But there are other Catholic entities, such as schools, hospitals, orphanages, convents, monasteries, etc., that I may need to check for records of my family. The Catholic Church puts out every year the Official Catholic Directory, and it was first published in 1817 and has continued on until this very day. I have Catholic ancestors who lived in Manhattan. And this was very important to me. There is a website for this Official Catholic Directory, but it does not contain nearly all the important research information that the actual printed volume has. We happen to have a full set of these at BYU, which is where I ran into my first printed copy of it. The online version doesn't contain all this historical parish information. This helped me to locate the parish my German Werner immigrant ancestors attended in the 1850s in Manhattan. My grandfather's military record included the fact that he was christened in a Catholic church in Manhattan. I read through all of the Catholic entities in the section for the Manhattan Diocese and found that there were only 2 parishes that catered specifically to German immigrants, and only one of them was begun early enough to be where my ancestors attended. It was also located in their neighborhood according to the city directory. So all of that added up to me being able to correspond with that church and locate their records. All right. Sometimes we have an interesting problem in locating church records because each church did not necessarily have a church building for each denomination and did not have a minister who lived in town. So there might be a circuit rider preacher who came through periodically. It's well to try to figure out who they reported to and where those type of records would be stored. My own German Catholic priest family arrived in Texas in 1845. Their brand new Texas town of Fredericksburg had no permanent priest until 1857. Those early records of visiting priests must be somewhere. So it's up to us to try to find those journals and logs they kept. Other jurisdictions and entities that our ancestors may have been a part of that would have their own records might be fraternal organizations such as the Masons, business or trade unions, ethnic organizations, religious organizations, benevolent service or groups that have a cause that they support, lineage or historic societies such as the DAR or the DUP, the Daughters of the American Revolution or the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers. It might be military or veterans groups that have records such as the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic, that involves the Civil War. Jurisdictions change over time. What I'd just like to say is buckle up, because it can be a wild ride following your jurisdictions. Okay, so what type of changes could occur? Boundaries, county seat, state capital, the responsibilities involving record care, state and territory where a county is located, the names of various jurisdictional levels, and there can be mistakes that happen. I thought I'd show you an example of Virginia over the course of time. As you may be aware, when Virginia was originally established, they claimed that Virginia went from sea to shining sea. So they drew those lines that you see there, extended them clear across to the other side of the continent. Well, there were some folks that disagreed with that. By 1775, Virginia looks like you see it there, much smaller, but still larger than today. You can see that by the 1787 map, which was at the beginning of the United States, it actually had extended out westward again a little bit more, as part of the Indian land was pulled into Virginia. Now, you see where the arrow is pointing there, that Virginia has had a birth pain and Kentucky has come into being. 1863 was when the next state was formed from Virginia Territory, and that was West Virginia. I don't know if you can see that little tiny arrow. Let me see if I can help point at it here. Right here, there's a light blue piece, and that's actually a really interesting case. In 1863, this larger piece became West Virginia, but that smaller piece was one more area that was ceded to West Virginia in 1867 that included Berkeley and Jefferson counties. So if your ancestor lived in Berkeley or Jefferson County, she could have been born in Virginia for 4 more years and still wound up in West Virginia without moving. So it's just knowing some of those little historical things like that that might explain to you why you're not finding the record in the county courthouse that you think you would. County boundaries often stayed the same, but sometimes the county seat changed, which might affect where records ended up. Why did a county seat change? Sometimes there was a town that was a boom town, and that was a place where there was the most population, and that's why it had been established as a county seat. But there might have been a change in fortunes where mines played out, or when the railroad companies decided where to put a line through that particular area, the railroad line didn't pass through that town, and this would likely cause another town to become a bigger, more important town and perhaps become the county seat, because of that ability to have transportation and have news arrive faster. Even then, there's nothing new about political funny business, and so when gerrymandering is not a new concept, and that went on back then as well. And sometimes a natural disaster occurred, such as a flood, a fire, or a storm that just obliterated a town or made it an area that was no longer a good idea to have the county courthouse and to keep precious records. I want to tell you about Calhoun County, Texas, which is one I deal with. The county seat of Calhoun County was originally Indianola, Texas, and it was called the Queen City of the West, and it was rapidly becoming one of the largest and best port cities in the Gulf. And until is in Matagorda Bay. In 1875, there was a massive hurricane there that wiped out a lot of the town. They recovered and rebuilt. But, as will happen, there was a bigger hurricane in 1886, which destroyed most of the town. And when some of the city officials were evacuating their offices, somebody left a candle on, and the storm winds blew it over, and then the fires started and burned down the rest, most of the rest of the town burned down in the post-storm fires. This was the county courthouse there, lovely structure. This is the remnant of it that was still showing in the 1940s, and you can see that it's right up on the shore. And here it is becoming smaller, and this is the Calhoun County Courthouse today. And the coastline has receded a little bit more, and that square that you see out in the water is the remnants of that square courthouse. So they decided way early on to move that county courthouse to Port Lavaca, which is further up the in the county, further away from the bay there, or the Gulf. Okay, sometimes responsibilities changed, and this is how records sets are identified and stored in the state or the county archives by who kept the records, which agency, meaning which agency, or who was responsible to see that they were kept. Knowing this is often the key to locating a record or a record set. And one other thing I'd just like to mention is that just because a record should have been kept doesn't mean it was, and doesn't mean it survived. So, in Utah, an example of this is that before 1898, there were no government requirements for keeping birth records. In 1898, after it became a state and it got underway, for the first 7 years, the county clerks were assigned responsibility for recording the births. But from what I have gathered from my research, the county clerks weren't doing a very responsible job of this. So in 1905, they made a change that the birth records would be the responsibility of the Utah Department of Health. And so there is a record set in the county archives that's just this 1898 to 1905 set of records. And you'd think, well, why is this small number of record years, its own set of records? Well, this is why, because there was two different entities keeping track of them, and that's how they're stored. In the case of Utah, those are now indexed online. Okay. So boundaries changed when territories became states. Most territories were broken down and became several different states. When the state of Iowa was formed on the 20th of December, 1846, 20 counties created by Wisconsin were included, and those names were retained. So suddenly, one of those counties, that used to be Wisconsin, it was now the same county, but it was in Iowa, which would mean that there would be a change of records, any of the records that were stored in the state archives, right then and there was a change in that, which state that would be. Also, 2 counties that were created by Michigan Territory and later given to Wisconsin were included in the bundle that became Iowa. So all 22 of these counties retained their names, but changed territories, and all became part of the state of Iowa without being in Iowa Territory first. These were added to what was Iowa Territory. So that might be something to keep an eye on, if your ancestors were in that area early on. Sometimes land control changes. Federal decisions and treaties have changed boundaries. Panama Canal Zone was part of our territory, and then it was returned to Panama. There's been a lot of issues along the borders with Mexico and Canada, particularly where the Rio Grande is involved, because technically the border is the river. So every time it changes course, deals have to be worked out between Mexico, and that affects all those border states there. Let me talk specifically about the District of Columbia retrocession of land to Virginia. The Constitution set the limits for the district at 10 miles square. George Washington was given the job of picking out that 10 miles, and he selected the site you see in the center map, which is along the Potomac and the Anacostia rivers. And this is the way it was for a time. But there was always grumbling and some trouble going on behind the scenes because abolitionists in Congress were trying to make the District of Columbia a slave-free zone. But if you look at this map, The city of Alexandria is part of District of Columbia at this time, and this was one of the major slave markets in the United States. So that caused a concern there. So if that area was returned to Virginia, then that wouldn't be a problem. And there were people who were pro and con that. But it wasn't until 1847 that what they call the retrocession of land restored that land that Virginia had contributed. So Washington, D.C. today is only made up of the piece that was contributed by Maryland. And that's why it has that odd shape, because it's just what's left of a square that was sort of bisected by a river. All right. The U.S. did go ahead and use Alexandria as a military outpost, and that's where my own father was stationed during the Korean War at Fort Belvoir. Okay, so county names, county and city names have changed. Sometimes, well, what I have noticed is that a lot of times towns were renamed about the time they became incorporated, and because they wanted to have the same name as their post office. And what happened was that in the beginning, a post office could just pick any name that it wanted. Well, at one point there was a postmaster who wrote a letter to Washington, to the head postmaster, and said, you know, there's 3 post offices in my area that have names that are nearly identical, and we're always getting each other's mail, and can something be done about this? And so the postmaster said, well, how would you feel about renaming your post office? And so what they did, though, to take care of that problem going forward was make a rule that there could only be one post office by a name in any given state. And so sometimes post offices had to be renamed, and when towns were officially organized, they would rename themselves to match that post office name. Sometimes it was to gain political favor. You know, like I said, political funny business was going back on then, so they were trying to, you know, make nice with somebody there who might be helpful. Sometimes county and city name changes occurred to honor someone, sometimes to eliminate a name that had become an embarrassment, and sometimes because a new entity was formed and things were realigned. Here's just a couple of examples of changes of city names that we know well now. Who knew Boston started out as Shawmut? And the residents of Sing Sing got tired of sharing a name with that infamous prison, and so they at some point they renamed their town Ossing in New York. So things happen for a lot of different reasons. There was a man in Florida. In fact, he was the first. He was the original settler of Orange County, Florida, which, and unfortunately, after he was the first settler there and got Jernigan, Florida, it's actually pronounced Jernigan by the locals. He became a career scoundrel, an eventual fugitive from the law. He ran off to Texas and hid for a while. And while he was out there in hiding, they decided to rename the town Orlando. So I think that's a good thing for Disneyland purposes. All right. Sometimes there are anomalies in jurisdictions. I've given you links, loads of links in the syllabus for each of these cases, and that will be posted so you can get a copy of that. So let's talk about some of these particular examples here. This is a picture of Dallas County today, and that big thing that looks like some kind of an amoeba is the city of Dallas. If you look at that carefully, you will see that the city of Dallas has land in 5 different counties: Denton, Collin, Rockwell, Kaufman, and Dallas. Notice the green oval that's just north of that city of Dallas, the name there. This is called the Park Cities Enclave. It's comprised of two small cities, Highland Park and University Park. They wanted to be incorporated into the city of Dallas, but Dallas said no. So that's not part of the city of Dallas. They have their own government, their own schools. There's another tiny mark here, which you can't see the green in because it's so small, but it's near the southwest corner of Dallas, and it's another enclave known as Cockrell Hill. Same situation. It was not incorporated in. Some original towns were annexed by the city of Dallas. Alpha, Texas, which was a freedman's town in the beginning, and other towns that became ghost towns, Oasis, Texas, and Nussbaumer. So you've got to do this, the history like this and learn about how the jurisdictions have changed. I just look at this map and think, can you imagine when the 5 counties have to get together and decide on, try to agree on what can go on in the city of Dallas? I mean, it's just it's a massive coordination effort, I'm sure. So, other cities that are like this, many cities are like this. Milwaukee is made up of 3 different counties, Milwaukee, Washington, and Waukesha. Tulsa, Osage, Rogers, and Wagner. So your syllabus has a link to U.S. cities in multiple counties. And depending on where they live in the city, they may turn up in the records of those several counties, because for them it was just a move in the same city, but it might have put them over a county line. I have a family that's currently, giving me gray hair, that lived in Kansas City, both of them, on both sides of the river. So I get to look back and forth between Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri. Okay, sometimes there are cities located, cities like this, this is another example of what I was talking about, but it's a very small city. It's not just big cities that can straddle more than one county. Chesterfield, the city, was started pretty much on the border between Madison and Delaware counties in Indiana, and it's only 2,500 population, but it's in Union Township and Madison County and Salem Township in Delaware County. And in many of the states in the United States, the township is another record-keeping level. So you have 4 potential locations, record-keeping entities involved here, at least, and to remember if you were going to research Chesterfield. Okay. The city of New York is made up of 5 boroughs, which the state of New York is made up of counties. In New York City, each borough is also a state county. So, and you can see not all of the names of the counties match the names of the boroughs. So, for instance, Manhattan is New York County, and Staten Island is Richmond County. So you have to keep track of those things when you get into a complex situation like that. As far as independent cities go, there's a number of those in the United States. Most of them are in Virginia because of a change that occurred in their state constitution in the 1870s. The other big independent cities are Baltimore, and you can see that Baltimore separated from the county of Baltimore in 1851, and now Baltimore County kind of looks like a crescent wrench, So that would be the time when, if you had ancestors there early on, you would need to possibly switch where you're looking for records. This is St. Louis, and that's another one of them, and it became independent from St. Louis County in 1876. And Carson City is even a unique version of an independent city, because it turned out that not only was Carson City an independent city, but on April 1st, 1869, Carson City and Ormsby County, Nevada consolidated. So there is no Ormsby County anymore. And the minute they consolidated, Ormsby County was decommissioned. So the record-keeping entity now there is Carson City. Of course, the county courthouse would still be there, but it's just something to know that these things are still going on today. Sometimes there's non-contiguous territory involved. This is the little town of Elsie, Michigan. And as I was looking at it for research purposes, I found that most of Elsie is on the east side of the river, but there's this piece over here that actually is on the west side, plus half of this island in the middle of the river. So that could be an interesting, and in genealogy we always say when we see something very interesting and unusual like that, there's a story there. So I imagined if you went into the history of the area, you might figure out how it got like that. But that also means that all this area between them is not part of Elsie. And so if your ancestors were living in that zone there, you want to keep track of the goings on like that. Sometimes there's confusingly common conditions in progress. The most common place name in the United States, not surprisingly, is Washington. There are 88 plus cities, towns, boroughs, and villages. And believe it or not, there's 31 of the states have a county named Washington County. And we even talk about the 250 townships. So if your ancestors just made the remark that they lived in Washington and you're not finding them, you have some other options of places to search. So you might want to look into that a little bit more closely. Okay. And one of the things that got me was that there are 5 Washington townships in New Jersey alone. You wouldn't think New Jersey was big enough to have repeat names like that, but I guess so. So I guess everybody wanted to name it after the father of our country. So don't make assumptions. Look around at other places nearby that have the name you're looking for. All right. Sometimes counties and cities are named after states. It really can get confusing at times. There's an Iowa County in Wisconsin, and Delaware counties in New York, Ohio, and Oklahoma, and so on, as you see in the list here. So don't let yourself be confused. Don't look because somebody said there were. I actually saw some research yesterday that was posted to some family trees that, of a family that I'm currently doing research on, and somebody had mistaken a Delaware county for the state of Delaware. And it made no sense if you looked at the family pattern in the census or anything, but still they had put in the state of Delaware. So this stuff goes on, and don't add to the problem. Try to straighten things out like I'm trying to do on that one. Okay. So there's U.S. places named after foreign locations. Here's a list. In the United States, there's 26 places named Paris, 3 of which are in Wisconsin. 15 of these are cities, and the largest one is Paris, Texas, which even has its own Eiffel Tower. This may or may not be some kind of a clue as to where the settlers in a given location originated in Europe or elsewhere. In New England especially, many places are named for locations in England. I just happened to find this Wikipedia list showing all the places in Connecticut named for places in England. And and if you're researching your ancestry, it's well to consider that possibly they named their town after the location they came from. But it does, it could cause confusion. So just knowing that. All right. Did you know that you could actually visit London when you were in Arkansas, California, Kentucky, New Hampshire, Ohio, West Virginia, and Wisconsin? So somebody might have said they were from London, and then that's not even including the London in Ontario, Canada. Okay, so there are places that no longer exist, but their records may well exist. And so knowing how to follow that through to locate what happened to the records of places that no longer exist. Some places became ghost towns as the population moved on. Some places were flooded. Some of this has to do with eminent domain. There are many towns that were flooded in order to create reservoirs, and so their records and hopefully their burials were moved elsewhere before the area was flooded. As far as eminent domain goes, my husband's grandparents, my grandparents, and great-grandparents all were forced to move due to highway construction. Their property was taken by eminent domain. Butte, Montana, which you may know is a major mining area, originally the mines were underground. When they decided that they wanted to do open pit mining there, one neighborhood after another was gobbled up by the Anaconda open pit mining operation, and so those people were moved to other outlying areas. And so it could be interesting reasons why your ancestors moved, or why the place they lived isn't there anymore. So they're lost towns lost to flood, fire, mining disaster, toxic waste, and storm. You saw what happened to Indianola, the capital city of Calhoun County. There can be there was been mining disasters and toxic waste problems in Pitcher, Oklahoma, and other places where the mine tailings were too close to the town. And some places they got so busy mining that they didn't realize they were undermining the buildings in town, and it became unsafe to live there anymore. Islands often wear away. In the Chesapeake Bay, when our ancestors arrived early on in the colonial period, there were 500 more islands than are there today. Well, what I should say is there was about 500 islands. 400 of those have already disappeared, and many of those were settled. And let me show you. This one is called Holland Island. And Holland Island was 5 miles long in the beginning. The white outline shows what it did look like. On the right side of the screen, you can see that all of this has worn away. None of these islands in the Chesapeake Bay have rock under them. They're all just sedimentary islands from the glacial period. And so all this is worn away, and it's gotten, and the land is compacting, and so at high tide, this is all underwater now. This was the last house on Holland Island. It once had stores, a post office, a school, a church, a baseball team, a doctor. There were 60 homes, and 90 fishing boats docked there. And this was the last home that was left. By 1918, the wave action on this island was so strong that it was endangering a lot of the houses, and people began to move away. This is what it looked like when the houses were still there. See the sandy nature of it. And this was the last picture that was taken before this house collapsed into the Chesapeake Bay in 2010. There were 3 cemeteries on this island, and one of them is already completely gone. The other 2 will be. So I hope they were properly recorded. But that might be what happened to where your ancestors lived. Southern Louisiana loses a football field of land every hour. And let me just say that the state of Maryland loses approximately 260 acres of tidal shoreline due to erosion each year. So if you have coastal ancestors, be sure you get on finding their records and tracing their lives while you still can, and figuring out where the records may have been relocated. So the real question is, where are those records now? You want to check the county courthouse of any county that the town was in. You want to check the district court records. You want to check with the County Historical or Genealogical Society. They're tremendous fonts of knowledge. They're the people right in that area who do those things, who keep track of things for the love of them. You want to check with, if you can find the local town historian, and look for newspapers. And like I said, the cemetery may still be there, even if the rest of the town isn't. Records stay in the jurisdiction where they were created unless the jurisdiction doesn't exist anymore, or records have been transferred to the state archives or other location for storage, or records were lost or destroyed. This is what Utah territory looked like in the beginning. You can see that it lost a lot of counties or parts of counties to the surrounding states. And also, this is more counties than there are in Utah today. Primarily, the counties that don't exist anymore are up in this northeast corner where somebody got really anxious and formed these counties, but they were never really settled in a major way, so they were combined and didn't exist after a certain number of years. Well, this is the way Utah turned out. On the Utah State Archives website, there is a chart of the 10 extinct counties showing when they were formed, when they were dissolved, and the present location of those lands, which might give you help in locating records of those areas. All right. And for those extinct counties, there's also a chart of the district court records that are involved, even though they only existed. The last one, I think, was gotten rid of in, I think, 1862, something like that. There were 3 different district courts involved with records during that time period, in which there might be records found of cases in those areas. So proximity and preference. Sometimes our ancestors, well, you know, you think, well, this is the county you live in, so this is the county courthouse you would go to get your marriage license or to take care of whatever things need to be taken care of at a county courthouse. But did your ancestors actually go to the county courthouse for the county in which they resided, or one that was more convenient? I'm going to show you a map example that will make the point that politicians may not have known of or considered geographic impediments when creating jurisdictions. Some folks travel great distance, and also another concept with proximity and preference is that some folks travel great distances to have ceremonies performed in their preferred church. So let me show you that. This is in Arkansas, and that river that's kind of going through on an angle through the middle of the state there, in this area of the state, is the Arkansas River. And you can see Conway County there. On one side of the river is Morrilton, which is Conway's county seat. But there is a piece of Conway County right here that's on the other side of that river. And doesn't it make sense that if somebody wanted to get married and didn't have a way across this river, or it was in the spring during the flood time, you know, where the river was running high and fast and it was dangerous to cross, that they might have just slipped over here to Perry County and gotten their marriage license and taken care of things there. So keep things like that in mind as you look at the geography, because it's clear that the politicians didn't do that. I mean, how easy would it have been to just make that the county line and put this piece with Perry in it and just solve that problem? So maybe sometimes you had sneaky ancestors. Sometimes they were going off to elope because maybe their families didn't approve, or maybe they were too young. So there's a thing called a Gretna Green. It's named after a place in Scotland where this tradition apparently began. But in every area, there is some nearby area that's known as the local Gretna Green, which is a place with fewer marriage restrictions. So your ancestor might have run off to one of those areas. All right. So folks quickly figured out the closest and easiest places to elope. It might have been just over the state border or a county or two away. We had a case of that in my own family where we were having a hard time finding a marriage, and when I told my cousin where I finally located, he said, "Oh, I should have thought of that. That's the local town in this part of Texas where people run off to get married." And it was a marriage in our family that was between a very Lutheran family and a very Catholic family, which was probably caused some family consternation, but that's how they got away with it. So challenge 4 is determining potential jurisdictions. So possible jurisdictions in the United States are borough, city, county, municipality, township, town, village. So let's talk about that. So what's the difference between a village, a borough, a municipality, or a city? It varies by state. That's the challenge of U.S. research, is we have 50, 51, if you want to count in D.C. on that, you know, different ways that things are organized, that the way the court system may be organized. The factors in differentiating between villages, boroughs, cities, and municipalities are population and the structure of government usually, and whether or not a locality is incorporated. So learning the jurisdictional terminology for specific state and county is a must because they do differ. There are three meanings of the word township in the United States. One is this very famous survey township, the range and this grid system whereby which was used in surveying land in the United States for the purpose of describing parcels. And I've given you a link to a Wikipedia article that shows all of this in detail and explains it. So that was used for mapping deeds and grants. The size of a survey township was 6 by 6 miles or 23,040 acres. So that's kind of interesting. And a township can also be a unit of local government. It's a civil township. And in the states there that I have put the initials for, that's also a unit of local government. So it's a level, a place-keeping level, a record-keeping level is what I'm trying to say. And this works really well, especially in rural areas, because in those areas, many of the people don't live in a town or a city. But this way, they're still part of a record-keeping unit. They always live in a township. And then there's a third kind of township, a chartered township, and that's only in Michigan. So if you're doing Michigan research, look into that. All right. So the crucial level of record keeping in the United States is counties. The most important types of records, civil records, this is where they're kept. So here's some of those types of records that you might find in the county courthouse. Just a quick look at that. This is the 1870 census in one of the areas where my ancestors lived in California, in the northern area, in the Gold Zone. So on this very page, there are 4 place levels. I wanted to point that out to you. When you're using a census, be sure and look at the top of the page. These people are in the state of California, Tehama County, Pasquinta Township, and Red Bluff is the post office. I happen to know that Red Bluff was the little city there, but I don't think it was incorporated at the time, so they're listing it as the post office. So that's 4 place levels to look for records of these people. So that's another place to get some ideas. This is a Wikipedia page that's an index of the U.S. counties, and it's got a marvelous list that you can actually mess around with. There are currently apparently 3,143 counties and county equivalents in the United States. And let me just say that when you hear the term county equivalents, they're talking about, in Alaska, they're called boroughs, and in Louisiana, they're called parishes. Excuse me. And the default chart shows all of the counties alphabetically within each state. So you can also make it, have it just alphabetize all of the counties of the United States. So if your family said they were from Adair County and you didn't find them in the state where you thought, you could see there's 3 more Adair counties to check out and see, check to see where it's the nearest one to where you thought they were, if something's just over a state border, that sort of thing. Okay. Sometimes our family records are like that. They just list a place without linking it to a state or a county. So this is one way of getting more ideas. Okay, remember, when a new county was formed, they did not carve up the county record books. They wrote on both sides of the pages, so that was impossible. So whenever that county change occurred, anytime before that, you're going to be looking in the previous county courthouse. You need to look for records under the county jurisdiction that was in effect at the time of the event you are researching. And you'll need to investigate the history of the areas where your family lived. Follow the boundary and name changes. That's where county histories and state archive records can be very important. What about counties that no longer exist. Why would that happen? Some counties were renamed but retained their exact territory. Some counties were retained their names but ended up in another state or territory. We've had examples of those things. Some county names were lost when a county was divided into 2 or more counties and the original name not retained by either one. Some county lands were divided between other extinct counties. Some counties lost enough land to become unnecessary or non-functional when territories were formed or divided. And many counties were proclaimed or authorized, but never organized due to a lack of actual settlement, which is what I was talking about in northwestern Utah. And some counties were begun without proper legal authority and later declared unconstitutional. So some counties lost population to the point where the land was absorbed by other counties. So various reasons. So Wikipedia has a wonderful list of the former United States counties, and you can look at those state by state. And they include information like it was reestablished under another name, or the land was absorbed by a different county. So it gives you those wonderful clues right there. So also I have found information just Googling. So what I like to do is Google, fill in the name of the county and courthouse. And the reason I do that is because when you read the history of the county courthouse, you find stories about floods or fires or storms, tornadoes that may have damaged the courthouse and may have caused record loss. So you get ideas of where county records are stored. Sometimes counties have off-site storage locations, sometimes they don't. Anyway, it's a good way to try to catch up with what may have happened to records. And then you also have found interesting information by just filling in the name of the county and doing, like Adair County boundary changes. So I was actually told early on if I was going to do New York or Virginia research that I might need to chart the pedigree of the county that I was looking in to see all of the previous versions of it. And those states particularly had a lot of boundary county divisions. But I think it's useful in all states and areas which you might be researching in. And what you want to know is what counties and territories it was formed from, when did it lose land, and when did it acquire land. I just looked up, I'm working in Westchester County used to take in the area that was the Bronx in New York City. So I decided to look up, Westchester County boundary and find out about when that changed and why. And I came up with this wonderful multiple page website that shows that crooked boundary and explains why it's crooked, and also shows what that area was like over the course of time as the boundary changed. And I just picked out a couple of maps there, but there were all through time. So you might need to organize your findings in some way, list all the events. It's kind of nice to do it on an Excel spreadsheet so you can just insert more events and more years and keep track of the locations where your family was, and then keep track of the possible jurisdictions involved, and have a little check mark box so you can make sure you've actually gone through all of the possibilities. And I just made up one here with some ideas. Really easy to do. So the fifth challenge is to determine where the records you seek can be searched, ordered, and viewed. So you want to learn what records were originally kept. Records may have been lost, stolen, destroyed, or poorly kept. When I was reading through, I found a book about all of the county courthouses in Missouri, and one of the counties, everybody thinks that all the county courthouse fires in the South were the result of the Civil War, and I want you to know that's not true at all. I found 2 or 3 in Missouri that were actually the result of an arson fire because somebody was trying to destroy their criminal record and managed to take out a lot of other records that way. So what has survived, and then where are they now? So remember that records may not be archived near the point of origin. They may have ended up most anywhere. if it's religious records, for example, the major collection of Quaker records in the United States resides at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, no matter where the records originated. There are various ethnic groups. You may have heard of the Germans from Russia, and their collection is headquartered at NDSU at Fargo. That's North Dakota State University, and so they have a wonderful web page and all kinds of links toward that. So if you have something, you know, if there you might be a special religion or an ethnic group involved like that, you might be able to find things in other locations than you think. Watch for records that are unique to that particular county or state. I have a lot of California ancestry, and one thing that's unique to us that's been filmed and posted on Ancestry and Family Search is the California Great Registers, and they go from 1866 to 1898 and kind of help with that period where the 1890 census is missing. They're essentially voting registers, but they also include the information about anybody who is not U.S. born. They include their information about when and where they were naturalized. There's the Georgia land lotteries, which is what brought a lot of people to Georgia, and that's the years in which they occurred. And that may explain why and where your ancestor turned up. They literally had land lotteries, and people got free land. Nebraska, there's an 1893 roster of veterans, you know, that they're keeping track of. So when you're looking through the Family Search Wiki and that, look for records that are unique to that area that may give you assistance. Try as you might, some things can't be stopped. Let's see. I love this sign. And I want to quote, end with a quote by Benjamin Disraeli, who was the Prime Minister of England. He said, "In a progressive country, change is constant. Change is inevitable." So it looks to me like the United States is a very progressive country indeed. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us today for our webinar. If there are any questions, feel free to write those in now and we can make sure they're answered. If there aren't any questions, we'd like to thank you for joining us. Remind you this webinar has been recorded, and if you want to come back and watch any part of the webinar, you can go to our YouTube channel or visit our website here to find the recording there as well. We have our March webinar schedule posted online, and we encourage you to go look at that and see what we have coming up. If you didn't get a chance to fill out our polls down here at the bottom, feel free to take a chance to do so now and let us know if you have any feedback for today's webinar. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you.